Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool update for you from the brand Archimede. Now a little bit about them. They were founded back in 2003, essentially, but they are one of the Ickler brand watches, which was actually established back in 1924. And basically they always aim to offer those high quality models with an affordable price point. And they have a couple of different lines, Archimede being one of them. And I think they really deliver. Now, some key common characteristics and design language for this type of watch. I would consider this kind of that everyday outdoor adventure watch. You're going to want something that's, of course, sporty, legible, tough, and very, very capable. Now, this is their Outdoor 41 anti-magnetic, which has always had a hardened steel case, but recently they actually updated it to have the option for a hardened stainless steel bracelet. So that's why we have the update. If you're a fan of the channel, you probably already saw the original video review, but honestly, this thing is so nice that I think it actually deserves a second look, even though it's essentially the same watch with just a hardened bracelet. So hopefully this video will reach a couple more viewers this time around, because I think it still has so much to offer. And of course, they've really made that package even more valuable. There's just a lot of value add there with the fully hardened case and bracelet. And then of course it's made in Germany, it's anti-magnetic, water resistant to 200 meters. I mean, it just does so many things great. Also has an amazing, very original aesthetic. It even has a heat treated blued hand. I mean, this thing is objectively one of the most kind of value feature rich watches that's available out there for around $1,000. So I'm very, very impressed, and I gotta say that I'm really happy to see this one. The prices as of this video right now, filming it, excluding VAT, of course. I'm not paying any VAT because I'm actually in the US. So this actually goes for $924.37 plus shipping, and that's euro, of course. And then basically, if you wanted to add on the stainless steel bracelet, but with the hardened feature, it's about an 84.03 euro add-on, or you can buy it separately. If you already bought the watch or whatever and you have it on leather or something like that, maybe you bought it from a dealer, and maybe you just want to buy the bracelet individually, and it's only 201 euro, of course, plus shipping if you want it completely separate. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get a closer look at this one. All right, guys, as you can see, really lovely, very, very modern and minimalist in aesthetic. It just screams German sports watch. So the case size is 41.3 millimeters in diameter. And then you also do have, of course, the 11 millimeter thickness, which really is not bad when you consider the fact that this is 200 meters water resistant, and it has an automatic movement. So that's really great from that standpoint. The lug to lug is only 46.5, which is great. Of course, it does have that Ickler hardened stainless steel, which is like 1200 Vickers, which is really great. It also has protection from magnetic fields up to 80,000 amperes per meter, or 1,000 Gauss, which is, you know, it's pretty legit. You know, it does have that nice soft iron kind of Faraday cage around the movement, so it does offer some real protection there, which is quite nice. Now, the sapphire on here is flat with inner AR coatings, and since the AR coating's only on the inside, the nice thing is you don't have to worry about the outer portion of the sapphire wearing down like you will with some other German watches that I own. So that's nice to not have that as a worry, and honestly, the anti-reflective coating does quite well. As you can see, you can really look at the depth of that dial, and of course, yeah, you can get some reflections in there, but generally it's negotiating it really well, and at this angle you almost can't tell that there is any crystal there at all. Now, another thing is, of course, we have this beautiful fixed and fully brushed bezel, which has some nice contours to it there if you take a close look. It's not just kind of one dimensional by any means. It does have some great shape to it. It's very minimalist as well, but it just has those little fine touches and details I think that you can pick up and appreciate. I really do also enjoy this case shape. Definitely gives it its own look, and then these really nice crown guards and this nice large screw down crown signed, which is great. And of course that screw down crown has a lot to do with the 200 meters of water resistance. And this is a great crown, just so you know. Perfect sizing. It's nice and large, but still quite protected because of these really well contoured. Look at the just the room and space and gap around those. That is a high precision area there where the crown guards and the crown meet, nice and tight. There's not a lot of gap there. There's not a lot of places for things to get gunked up, which I think is really great. And it's also just tactily nice to touch as a touch point. Gives you nice amount of purchase when you are opening this bad boy. And of course the action itself is really quite nice. Now inside, although you can't see it, it has an automatic Sellita SW200, and then of course it's wrapped inside of a soft iron anti-magnetic housing, which is great. The case back is solid and etched. As far as the dial goes, you know, it is a very nice but still printed affair. But I think it actually does really go with the aesthetic, so I do not mind one bit. And then everything is essentially nice and matted, and then you do have you know, printed loom and printed indices, but it's all very sharply done. I do enjoy that outer chapter ring with that kind of three-dimensional bevel there, how we have basically the minute every 5 minutes marked there on top of that kind of bevel, and then on the straight portion that has a vertical face to it, it actually is the little tick marks for each minute or each second, depending on how you look at it. And the nice thing is it just adds, again, another layer of dimension, and it's not shouty or loud dimension. It's really just well refined and restrained, as you would kind of expect from that German aesthetic. Very clean, you know, not a lot of ornate details. Definitely everything is more based off of a functional aesthetic. You do also have a date window at the 3 o'clock, which is great because, hey, you got to have a date. I think a no date would look cool too as well, but I think the date actually does help balance out the dial, especially with this really nice flowing crown guard going into the oversized crown. I think that is actually a really good look. You do have 200 meters or 20 atmospheres of water resistance. Now, to get to what's new and improved here, the bracelet, of course, now is Ickler hardened stainless steel as well. And it's really nice. And you do have a 20 millimeter lug width here. And then, of course, before with the standard steel bracelet, you could get a little bit of wear here because you have a very nice hardened case with a non-hardened bracelet and end link. So that interface, essentially, when it would come into contact, it would wear it quite quickly because this undercut here is actually still quite, I mean, it's not rough, but it's definitely so well defined. I would consider it a bit sharp. Not sharp as in a lack of finishing sharp, but just so kind of high definition that it is really quite sharp in from that respects. So not unfinished, but finished to such a degree that it still actually does hold quite an edge there. Now, with that 20 millimeter lug width, there's still this nice flare that comes out, which adds to a really nice taper, which is about 23 millimeters. That tapers down to 18 millimeters. We do have screw pin connectors, which everybody always looks for and loves. So that's one thing that's great. From that standpoint, of course, fully milled clasp and signed, as you can see here. One thing also to note about the clasp and probably just the bracelet in general, one kind of warning that Archimede gave me was because of the hardening process. If you did leave this in water for any extended amount of time and didn't dry it off afterwards, you could develop some surface level kind of patina, what would look like rust spots, but essentially can just be wiped off. And that's just has to do with the hardening process itself. So that's just something to consider. Of course, me being in Southern California and having a bevy of dive watches, I really don't need to take this into the deep salt water for any real reason when I have dedicated divers for that. So I haven't had any issues with it. I think it's done really well when it comes to water. I've washed it off and whatnot. And that's for me, one of the great things about having a water resistant watch is after you wear it on a hot day, you can run it under the sink and rinse it off and really have no worries as long as the crown is screwed down. So this thing's nice. And then also, of course, you do get those 6 micro adjustment holes, which you can't argue with. And it is nicely signed. I mean, it's a good look. I mean, this is a really handsome, well-composed piece. And I think it just doesn't get enough attention because for whatever reason, I think it's just not quite as popular as some of the other mainstream German brands, like Stova when you want to get a Flieger watch, or like Zen when you want to get something a little bit more modern, or Damasco for something a little off the wall. I think Archimede really hit a bit of a sweet spot in kind of being that high-tech, high-spec, but also very clean and independent in style. You're not going to really mistake this for any other watch, which I think is something that is really special and quite unique within the German kind of minimalist Bauhaus market. So I have to give them props for that. But let's go ahead and get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. All right, guys, as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, this thing wears just about perfectly. Get a little bit more arm in there. I think it wears great. Obviously, it is a sports watch and it is meant to be quite legible and bold. It's not like this is trying to be, a part-time dress watch or anything like that. You get it up close, of course, there's going to be a little bit of lens distortion and it's going to read quite large. But honestly, a lot of the reason why it reads a bit larger is because of that dial, that expansive dial, and then you consider also that angled chapter ring there does add some additional dimension and really pushes this dial out to the edges of the case. But in itself, I mean, when it comes to the actual weight of it and not just the visual weight, I think it actually wears really nice. As you can see, really quite slim when you look at that, and that beautiful taper on the bracelet really helps with that those refined lines. You almost get kind of an integrated bracelet look, but of course without the integrated bracelet limitations, which I think is great. And man, that thing just lays so flat on the wrist so nicely. Get a little bit more arm in there because I think some people might just automatically write this off and say, hey, this is too large at the 41 millimeters, but I find it to be really quite nice. I'm sure the 39 that they have is really well proportioned also, but I prefer, of course, the bracelet here because it does have the milled clasp. And then now it's a hardened bracelet. I do believe they do offer hardened bracelets for the smaller unit as well, but it doesn't have but unfortunately, it doesn't have the anti-magnetic capabilities or the milled clasp, at least not as of yet, from the last time, from when I'm making this video. But on the wrist, I think, you'd expect it to work well, and I think it absolutely does, and is super versatile. I mean, this thing is absolutely killer. I don't wear it enough, and it's only because I'm a reviewer and I have so many watches to kind of cycle through. But let's actually go ahead and set up for some low light and Loom shots so we can see what this thing looks like in transitional lighting. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, that BGW9 Loom is absolutely legible, and beautifully enough, you actually do get even the numerals loomed, so even if you do get a little bit of confusion there and you're not great with kind of with your orientation, you really can't go wrong when you can just see 12 o'clock is right there. Of course, it also does have the double indice, which is also very helpful for quick orientation. But one thing I really like to do during these Loom shots is work in some low light transition, because you're not always going to be in, out in the middle of a field in kind of direct sunlight, which my hot studio lights do a really good job of simulating. Sometimes, and really most of the time, you're going to be in less than optimal lighting, coming in and out of you know, from outside, outdoors, maybe underneath an overhang or two, or just coming in and out of your vehicle, or just being in maybe an office space where you're going to have maybe some harsher lighting conditions. As you can see here, very high contrast, and really it will expose any type of imperfections when it comes to that finish, but you can still see that the light plays relatively nicely and flows quite uniformly over the brushing here. And then you can also get a look at the way the dial is going to play. You can see with a lot of lighting, it can take on some very, you know, kind of grayish charcoal features, but most normally when it's not absorbing in a bunch of light or reflecting it off of its kind of matted finish, you're going to see it's really just going to be quite dark and a bit of a negative space. The nice thing is you're not going to get a lot of reflection off of it like you might with a glossy dial, and that blued hand is going to play with the light really well because it is thermally blued and it's not coated, which is great, but it's also brushed, so it's going to hold that light in a really fun way versus something that's going to be really reflective and kind of glinty in the light. This is going to just read and render as really quite blue and really quite nice in my opinion. So guys, closing thoughts here. On the wrist, of course, it feels like a purpose-built sports watch because it is. So while there is heft, there's also, you know, clear care for wear ergonomics, which I have to appreciate. Now, as far as model variations go, they actually even released a new 41mm anti-mag, but that one is actually full titanium. So you can actually get this exact watch, but in titanium. So it's going to have a little bit of a different tint to it as far as the shade and the coloring, but it will be much lighter. And then you can also get the Outdoor 39 Protect stainless steel model is still available as well, which actually came out before this one. It was a bit of a predecessor, but still out there, and they do a lot of cool, fun updates as far as the seconds hand and some of the different dial variations. As far as comparable models go, you know, you think of something like this and an adventurer's watch, probably the most approachable, a really kind of high-spec adventurer's watch you would think of is something like the Seiko Alpinist, but now you also have things, models like the Boulder Expedition, or even the Monta Triumph, right, on kind of the more refined tool watch side or field watch side. You have the staples within the class like the Zen 556, or one of the new players being the Damasco DS30, another watch that I own and absolutely love. And if you really want to climb up the ropes and the ladders there, you do have something like a Rolex Explorer, of course, you know, one of the most popular adventure watches, or maybe like an Omega Railmaster as well, kind of within that same vein, but also adding quite a bit of magnetic resistance. So you know, that kind of fully loaded everyday adventure sports watch, you know, it's that space is really rising in popularity, and this type of popularity was typically really reserved for divers in the past when it came to sports watches. And I think this space and this kind of over-spec'd field watch slash adventure kind of watch, tough watch, is really a fun place, and there's some really cool watches that have been produced within this vein. Bottom line, the Archimede Outdoor 41 just might be one of the most capable tool watches on the market for all the reasons that I mentioned, guys. I mean, it has it all. You have a sapphire crystal with AR coating, you have a fully hardened case and fully hardened bracelet, 200 meters of water resistance, you know, you've got 1,000 Gauss of magnetic resistance, and the thing's hardened to 1200 Vickers on the hardness scale. So this thing's cool, and it has a Swiss made movement that can be really serviced by anybody, which is great. So I mean, it's got a lot to, you got a lot to love here. You have also you know, milled everything, right? You have screw-in links. You have so it's just like, where could we pick this apart? Okay, well, maybe it could look a little different, right? So aesthetics, and maybe it could be a little bit smaller. Again, that's just a personal preference, but objectively, this thing is fully loaded, and it's from a brand that's been around for a little while, from that kind of Ickler case brand, but Archimede, although it was only founded in 2003, they've really made a name for themselves, and are really quite trusted kind of within the space. So with all that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.